In today's video, you're going to learn everything you need to know regarding while loops in JavaScript. So first off, what is a while loop? Well, a while loop will allow you to run some code repeatedly while a certain condition is true. So while this condition is true, it's going to loop over the same code repeatedly until that condition is then false. So how does a while loop work in JavaScript? Well, on line 11 here, I declare a called count, and I assign that to the value of 0. And then on line 13, that's where I start writing my while loop. So to write a while loop in JavaScript, you use the while keyword that exists in JavaScript. And then behind that keyword, you follow that with opening up a pair of parentheses. And then within these two parentheses here, that is where you write your condition. And if this condition evaluates to true, then you will go inside the body of your while loop. So you create the body of your while loop using these curly braces here. And if this condition is true, you will enter your while loop and you will run this code within your while loop until this condition is no longer true. So in the body of my while loop here, all I do is increment my count by 1. So my condition is, okay, while the count is less than 10, I'm going to increment my count by 1. So what I would expect here, since my count is starting at 0, I will console log out 0, increment my count by 1, console log out 1, increment my count by 1, console log out 2, so on and so forth until my count is no longer less than 10, and then I will exit my while loop. So if I run this here, you're going to see that I get the count is 0 and then all the way down to the count is 9. And that is because on my last iteration of this while loop, my count is going to be incremented to 10. And then I'm not going to enter this while loop anymore because this condition is false. Now, within while loops, one important thing to remember is that make sure that you change your condition some way within your while loop. As if I didn't have this increment count here, it's actually going to cause a error in my program. As my condition, it's never going to evaluate to false if I don't change it at all within my while loop here. And this would cause what's called an infinite loop. This while loop would just keep running and running and running because this condition, it would always remain true. Count would always be 0. So within your while loop, just make sure to cause the condition to become false at some point, or else you can get just an infinite loop. And be careful with this a little bit because sometimes you might think that your condition will get to false, but in a live production application, something might happen that you don't expect, and it does cause that infinite loop. So within your while loop, you might do some sort of safe check to where you might say, okay, if I've run this while loop a certain amount of times, then I can write a break statement and break out of my while loop. So you can use the keyword break, and that will exit your while loop. So you could do something like this as a failsafe just to make sure that you don't get caught in an infinite loop, as in a live production application, you might run into something in which you didn't expect that causes an infinite loop. And it can be helpful to have these so you're not crashing your browser or stuff like that. So now let's touch on why a while loop is kind of useful. Well, let's say like in this example, I want to increment the count and make sure that it is 10 by the time I exit this loop. Well, if I didn't use a while loop, I might have to do something like, repeatedly up to like 10 different times, right? If my count is less than 10, increment my count. If my count is less than 10, increment my count. If my count is less than 10, increment my count. And you can see that this is repeating myself a ton here, and it's just a lot more code and it's much kind of less readable. And then plus I have to repeat this logic here. So let's say in the future, I wanted to increment my count by 2. Well, I would have to come change that at every line of code here. But if that logic is in my while loop here, I just have to change it in one place. All right. So they can prevent you from needing to do something like this, making your code a bit more readable and a bit more dry. Now, with while loops, there are also something called do while loops in JavaScript, in which you basically write the while statement after the body of your loop, but I very rarely ever see those. And I think that for those, it's just kind of, know that there's something in JavaScript called a do while loop that exists. And if you see it, it's basically like a while loop, except you perform your code and then you check your condition instead of checking your condition and then performing your code. So it just kind of flips it, but it works very similarly. And I think it's going to be pretty rare for you to see those. All right, but just wanted to mention it here so you do know that that exists. And if you run across it in a program, you're not like totally thrown for a loop. Pun is definitely intended as well. So a while loop allows you to run some code over and over again while a certain condition remains true. And it will not break out of that loop until the condition then evaluates to false. And the way that these work is you use the while keyword in JavaScript. Following the keyword, you open up a pair of parentheses, and within those parentheses, you write your condition. And while that condition evaluates to true, you can open up a pair of curly braces and write some code in the body of your while loop. And that code is going to be looped over and over again until your condition returns false. And make sure that that condition will evaluate to false at some point within your while loop to prevent an infinite loop. And that's basically all you need to know about while loops in JavaScript. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in that next one.